Good morning. My name is Tom, and today's video is about generational DV and substance abuse. Um, and we're going to discuss some history going all the way back to the 70s up to today involving Joey Bag of Donuts, his father, Johnny, and his son, Joey Jr. Now, I never met Johnny Bag of Donuts. From what I understand, he died in the mid 90s to early aughts. Joey loves his father, has nothing but respect for him. According to him, his father made him the man he is today, and he is right. His father was a union worker, and Joey has stories about when he was a kid and a teenager, and how his father was very pro-union, and how in the region and large portions of the country, according to him, you were an S unless you were in a union. They would only ever go to grocery stores that had union labor. They'd only ever buy made in America products. If his father caught him, shopping at one of those other stores, his father would beat the S out of him. His words. We talk about how his father was a real man, what's wrong with kids today, how that made him a real man. And the problem with children today is that parents don't beat the S out of their kids, and kids will actually call the police on their parents, and, the country's being destroyed. His father was a real man, a real drinker, a real American worker, and it's like, oh, okay. Your father was an alcoholic, and he beat you senseless. But, you don't say that to a person. I don't know how to reach somebody at his developmental stage and say, I'm sorry you were abused like that, without, setting the person off. That would go horribly wrong. So let's talk about the man Joey Bag of Donuts is today. Because he became a union man like his father, in the same union, doing the same kind of work. He became a drinker, and he was also addicted to other things. And it's his own words that he was addicted. And he beat the S out of his son to make sure his son grew up right, just like he did. Joey has all sorts of stories about running around with great guys, except all of his stories involve violent crime and drugs and alcohol. Getting into fights with people at bars, putting broken glass bottles up to people's faces, threatening people with firearms, all that stuff. But these were great guys. And then one day, I think sometime in the 90s, Joey Bag of Donuts suffered a terrible motorcycle accident. Now, I don't understand the how or why of it, but Joey hadn't done any work in the union within an entire year of that accident. So his insurance coverage lapsed. He had no insurance, no medical, and no disability. And he was an invalid. For an entire year, he was out of work. Wife left him because he couldn't support them, and she found somebody else to take care of her. So what about his friends? They held a benefit dinner for him. You remember, these are the friends who are always involved in violent crime and drugs and alcohol. Great guys. The first hint something was wrong was they made him pay to get into his own benefit dinner. Sounds like a setup. They took the money. He didn't get a cent out of it. You know, the lights were put out in his house, the water cut off. You know, he was destitute, sold off his tools, his furniture, his TV, all that stuff, and basically starved. He said that's when he went sober. Maybe he did, but today, when he says he's sober, most people will politely pretend they agree, they believe that, but he's not. And, you know, he was always out of work to the point where he should have retired years ago, but he doesn't have the time in. And, you know, another part of his history, you know, doesn't have enough time working to actually retire. It's a credit system. X number of hours towards your retirement credits. And he should have retired years ago. Another incident I don't know the timeline which came first, but for a while he was an elected official in the union, high ranking. And when his father was passing away from cancer, he wasn't able to perform his duties. And the way he handled it was one night when he got a phone call, woke up in the middle of the night, somebody had some sort of a complaint. I don't know what the complaint specifically was, just that somebody had something they thought was worth grieving against the employer. And Johnny cursed him out and resigned from his elected office right then and there. Sorry, not Johnny. Joey did. Johnny was stricken with cancer. Hard to keep the name straight, but you know. Okay. So that didn't go over well. And years later, he decided he wanted to run for office again. Not that high, but still reasonably high up. He won, somehow. And he stopped paying his union dues. To the point where he was ejected from his office. Now, I know a lot of people in the country think union dues are a scam. No, they actually pay for a service. They pay for your negotiated contract. They pay for the operating expenses of the union. They pay to get your elected officials to and from job sites. They pay to cover the costs of, you know, arbitration, legal expenses. Your union dues, to some extent, also in this case, pay towards some of the pension. He stopped paying it. And he was the elected official. And if you go too long without paying it, you actually lose your retirement because you're booted out of the retirement system. Because you lapsed for way too long. And you have to start all over. So there's that. So now he's in. He should have retired years ago. He's still forced to work. And he regularly has flashbacks now. When he sits down to have a meal with coworkers, can't help it. He immediately goes back to that meal, that dinner, where his friends betrayed him and robbed him. Every day he has those flashbacks. Can you imagine that? Going back to the worst moment of your life every time you sit down to lunch with your coworkers. Now let's talk about Joey Bag of Donuts Jr. So Joey Sr. did everything he could to help his son get into the Union, try to be a good father. And as I mentioned, he wanted his son to grow up right and be a real man like him. And so he beat the ass out of his son. So Joey talked about his son's 18th birthday, which was the day his son got his driver's license and his first APB across 3 counties in a car chase. And Joey hasn't connected the dots. He says, I did everything I could. I brought him up right. When it was bad, I beat the ass out of them like you're supposed to make sure they learn. Sometimes kids just don't learn. His son did get into the Union, but he's a lower tier worker. Less wages, benefits aren't as good. The retirement plan is not even close. And the son has addiction struggles as well. Has a hard time, holding a job, just like his father. And, the lack of awareness is part of the addiction. Joey doesn't understand that his life has been so hard because he held on to the wrong lessons from his father. The abuse, the violence, the addiction, to him, all of that's normal. That's just part of being a person. That's just life, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's what he got from his father. And that's what he passed on to his son. And so it's important to understand that that isn't just generational DV and generational addiction. It's generational trauma. Can't let it go. Can't acknowledge the past for what it is. And constantly running on defense mechanisms. And he went from a proud worker who at least held it together for himself long enough that he could retire, to the next generation, years behind on his retirement. Oh, and he also owes 20 grand in back taxes. I forgot that part. Sorry. To the third generation, who's bottom tier and has zero hope of hitting that retirement. And none of the living ones cannot acknowledge that they've been doing something wrong. They can't understand it, and they can't wrap their heads around it. And I think it's important to understand that before it starts impacting your own children. I'm not saying, you're a bad person because you have a couple beers after work every day. But certain lessons that are never spoken get passed on. And the next generation usually doesn't control the addiction as well as the previous generation. Don't know why. That's just how that goes. And so as each generation progresses, it gets a little bit worse and a little bit worse and a little bit worse and a little bit worse until the problem just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So, it's just food for thought.